call the meeting to order. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Mayor Johnston.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Francina.
Here.
Councilmember Blatz.
Here.
Councilmember Haney.
Here.
Councilmember Wyrick.
Here.
Chair Akins.
Here.
Vice Chair Quinn.
Here.
Commissioner Convery.
Here.
Commissioner DuPoit.
Here.
Commissioner James is absent. Commissioner McCready.
Here.
Commissioner McCatton.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. So if you'll all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, never get back there.
Okay, ready to begin? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Brian, did you have?
I did. I had one item of business that, personal business that needed to be a part of the public meeting for my own personal benefit. Last time we were together, I was with the council, was 3 weeks ago. Been a long 3 weeks. That was on January 24th in the public comments, which Mayor Johnston allowed me to make just prior to the gavel coming down. Probably should have gavelled me out. As part of those comments, I expressed my personal feelings regarding Councilmember Blatz. I publicly want to apologize to Councilman Blatz for what I said. They are thoughts I should have expressed privately, and my apologies to Councilman Blatz, to Mayor Johnston, and to the council for sharing those comments. And I hope to work together with you.
Thank you, it's much appreciated, thank you.
You're
Apology
welcome.
accepted. Thank you. Okay,
Let's
discussion.
get down to business.
Yeah, right, business. Okay, I'm going to let you lead the meeting, Brian.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Johnston. So, Mr. Vega called me about a week and a half or so ago and asked me about some agenda items for the discussion. To me, this is an opportunity for the Historic Preservation Commission to sit with the council and the mayor and the city manager and basically get some kind of feeling before the Historic Preservation then goes back to their cave and goes off on a path that, you know, we have our own light. We have no idea what the outside influences are thinking. So I tried to put some items on here that have been on our agenda. Some of them are on our agenda Thursday night, just something that we could talk about and maybe brainstorm a bit, and we on the HPC could get kind of a flavor of what the city council and the mayor and city manager might be thinking. So that's where these 4 items came from. So the first item on there is, again, what I just said, that we'd like to get the council's priorities for the historic preservation in the upcoming year. And you can see a couple things. One of those things that's in there that's probably key and is somewhat of a priority is council's thoughts, item number 3, which is the council's thoughts on a historic downtown district. We have, the city of Ojai, as you know, has one historic district, Terramina. I go in multiple cities, small towns, and often run into historic districts. We just, as a commission, wanted to get thoughts from the city council. Mayor?
Okay.
My first response to that is, have you talked to the landowners and have you talked to the businesses regarding this yet?
Councilman Haney, we haven't talked to anybody because we've been waiting for the formation of an ad hoc committee for the historic downtown district to rise to where it's an item we can actually take action on, and that's scheduled for Thursday night. So we have done nothing, again, because we couldn't and we didn't have an ad hoc committee. The ad hoc committee is to go and figure out what
Right.
downtown historic districts are.
So I guess what I would say then is, once that committee is put together and you can come back to council with some recommendations and some thoughts and allow some public comments, I think I'd be interested to hear all that.
Okay, so can we as a commission take that as an encouragement on your part?
Oh, yeah.
And your thoughts? Thank you.
Yeah, I would concur with that encouragement. To me, it's an open question of the effectiveness of design guidelines versus the designated historic district. A lot of what you do with an historic district is guidelines. And so what is the interaction between the guidelines we already have and what would be extra accomplished on top of that by having the historic district, and then what would be the boundaries of the historic district. So I think it's excellent to go and start getting feedback and try to figure out the most expeditious way, you know, of accomplishing cost-effective but still somewhat flexible preservation.
Great.
You know. And I think we are facing some challenges, though, because I think the economic conditions are going to be driving some changeover in some of the uses. And so it's a very timely question.
Yes, no.
I don't know if I
very good
made any
point.
sense, but those are my questions.
You did, thank you.
Okay.
And I'll watch it on the video replay time and time again. Thank you, Councilman Wyrick.
And do we have any kind of an estimated cost to study and designate a district? I know we had the one at Taramina, but I thought that was primarily done by the residents up there.
It was very resident-driven.
It was.
And there also, that's another point that I think Randy's raising. You know, you got to look at the percentage of property ownership that would be interested before you even continue, really. And if you don't get that buy-in by the sufficient percentage of ownership, then that kind of defaults to the design guidelines approach. You know, developing what we already have in terms of design guidelines, in my mind, anyway.
And I would also think, I think this whole process requires a ton of education. Because every time we talk about something like this, I know I need more information. So that would probably be the priority one of that ad hoc, is put together something that you can actually share, you know, give these individuals, you know, the owners. Because most people, I believe, and I'll speak for myself, I always think of the adverse conditions that this might do to me versus the good conditions. So I would think that someone would want to put together something that shows the pros and cons of a historic or a landmarking of my building.
Okay, Ryan, you had,
Can I ask Commissioner
Yeah, go
Haney a
ahead.
little more explanation? When you said adverse conditions, in your business, you know, you have to work with contractors and developers and looks of things. So adverse conditions would be extra costs to maintain a historic district? or-
Is doing this going to cost me more? Absolutely,
Yeah,
that's what I'm
so you're
saying.
talking
So I think the
about,
pros
yeah,
and cons is probably a
financial
better word
burden.
versus adverse.
Okay.
But I think educating the community as well as the individuals is real important. I think that's like basic 101 that we have to do.
Can I talk? Hi, I'm Gina McGatton.
Okay, we had a hand from Ryan, I'm sorry.
I'll wait. I was just going.
Oh, okay.
I was the next
Go ahead.
council member.
Go ahead,
So,
Dan.
no big deal.
I'm, when I was talking with both of you in my interview process, actually, and Darwin, one of the things was letting the community know who we were as a commission. And we started a Facebook page, and I was working on a brochure that just starts to dabble in the idea of what a historic preservation or a historic district would look like for the city of Ojai. And all of it has to do with community outreach and community knowledge, and to have us not have a face to us as a commission and have a face to our plans, and it's going to be work and compromise and a lot of back and forth, but I think that it's a timely thing. It's everything from the Thomas fire when we're all worried that we're going to lose Ojai, and the idea of wherever you evacuated to, when you thought of Ojai, you kind of thought of that downtown district. When you thought, you picture the bell tower, you picture the arcade. It's kind of our historic area. So just starting that at the same time that we're figuring out how much it's going to cost or getting support from the community. And I just think that I would like to, as an ad hoc, if we can also just start to dabble in letting the community know that it's an intention that we'd like to have their opinions and their conversations and invite them through our Facebook page to come to our meetings and come and talk and just get it started.
Thank you very much. Councilman Blatz?
Yeah, the number one thing I would say is that, you know, rent in the arcade is already a lot, and it's not an easy issue with some of the merchants in there. And when you have a historic district, you have a strange thing that, right, you have the property owners, and very few own their properties who are accessing the commercial space in the arcade. And the property values might tend to go up in a historic district, but some of the costs associated with maintenance, upkeep, and other things may go up. So that would generally increase the property value maybe, but it may also increase the rents. And with such a significant commercial area, I just would want to make sure that there was no additional stress on the merchants in there, because obviously anything that does well for that whole district doesn't do any good if it doesn't help the merchants as well, because it is a purely commercial district, unlike Taramina, which is purely residential and has kind of a different dynamic on that part. And if it is something we decide to do, the one other thing I'd say is that I would love to see this correspond, if it was something that was agreed upon and done at the kind of the same timeline as the ATP project is completed in that area. Because there's already going to be a change in the aesthetics of the downtown area significantly with the ATP project, and some of that's still going to get finalized. But it would make sense that as the ATP project was done, maybe the ribbon on the historic district is at the same time, and at the same time there's the unveiling of the Ojai Historic District sign, kind of corresponds to all the significant changes that are going to be in that core arcade area from the ATP project.
Great, excellent, thank you, Commissioner, or Councilman Blatz. Mayor Pro Tem Francina, your thoughts,
When I
please?
think of downtown Ojai, I always think of it as the where should I speak? Okay, I always think of downtown Ojai as a historic downtown. No post office, the arcade, the church, which is now the museum. I still think of it as the church. So I guess the next step would be just the practical things, you know, what it would cost. And I'm even wondering why would it cost more if an area that's already considered, isn't it already considered as a historic buildings? Isn't it, don't you think, don't people think of it that way?
Well, we think of it, but it's
Think
not
of it.
Well,
designated.
maybe
Yes.
because I've been here so long, it just seems like
Obvious.
you know, and it's, and
The
the
post
arc.
office tower is, but the arcade is not.
I know that it was remodeled, but I mean, the photographs of the arcade go way back.
I agree with you.
You know, it's historic.
Well, I also think too, along those lines, what's interesting is I think there's two parts to the arcade.
Uh-huh.
I think there's the facade, which is historical, and then what goes beyond the facade, and that's the actual rental properties that all these different entities own. So I think you're looking at two things here. That's why the education, especially demonstrating the benefits to the community as well as to the land, the owner, as well as to the renter.
And
So
to
I
the
think you have to look at all
tourism.
those. But I think there's two distinct areas there, because we've had this discussion about facades.
Right. And ironically, the facade covers up the historic building.
And if you'll allow me to jump in there, just to build on Councilmember Haney's point, the arcade, that front of it is a landmark, designated and thus subject to the landmark
Just-
requirements.
just the
But
facade.
Just the facade.
Right.
The buildings behind are not at the moment.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to just jump in on raising that issue. I think if y'all could really think about the boundaries. I'm not talking about contributing elements and boundaries. To me, the original City Beautiful vision extended from Fox, the Chaparral School, all the way to Blanche, the museum, now the museum.
Yeah.
That was the City Beautiful vision. Not everything's a contributing element in that, but I think that's another thing to think about. Boundaries and contributing elements.
Excellent, thank you. Mayor Johnston, do you have some thoughts? I'm just trying to get the council on.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess my concern would be, well, one, where are we on the Playhouse, the theater?
Yeah.
Item number 4, yes.
And I asked the question because
So I,
Walker and I were expert witnesses in the damage phase of the building, and the question that the Golden State attorneys raised, if this is such a historic area, has it ever been designated as, a historic building? And so, those things that in and of themselves have some value, I think it makes sense. But I've also heard stories, I don't know whether they're anecdotal or apocryphal or what, but the restrictions then that end up being placed on a property, if we're only talking about the way it looks from the front, but then there's there are varying stages of how much preservation, all the way up to creating a museum, in the commercial district. So I think we need, like Randy says, to be sure that the ad hoc committee engages with the community to see what exactly is being proposed. Otherwise, people may immediately start resisting because out of ignorance or maybe out of understandable caution.
So if I could, that contract has been signed.
Good.
Provenience Group is doing the work. We expect to have that report back by mid-March. Suzanne, anything further that we need to add to that, or?
We will get the draft back in mid-March. We will review it to make sure it complies with the SQL analysis that is required, and then get comments back and forth, and hopefully we'll have it on an agenda sometime in April or May.
What's this?
The historic structures report for the Playhouse.
Oh, okay.
And as an addition to that, I received an unsolicited email the other day from Craig Walker, and he has been asked by the Provenience Group to be the man on the ground in the valley.
All
So-
right. That's correct, yeah.
so
Wonderful.
I'm sure he will work with many people.
And for what it's worth, the city of Ojai is on the record at the Public Utility Commission with a picture Steve took from out of the hole of this side of the theater, taking a picture of the clock tower saying, all right, it's not historic, but it's in the shadow of something very historic. So that's as close as we've gotten so far.
Great.
Yeah, so now I'd like to open it up to the commission, please.
What I would say about the historic district is that it has come up in our commission hearings from time to time, and usually when something happens that I would describe as an item falling through the donut hole, to use a Medicare term. And what I would bring up now is the renovation of the old the laundry building and the turning it into a brew pub with, I think, can only be described as a less than fortunate addition of a strange steel structure in front. That should have come to the Historic Preservation Commission, and it did not. And so when these things happen, our commission starts to talk about, well, we need an historic district. So I think that our involvement in the development of any downtown core design guidelines would be helpful.
Thais, you had comment?
Right, I was going to say pretty much what Darwin just said, but I would like to add to that, that the design guidelines do not affect the Playhouse or that building that you're talking about, or a lot of the other buildings on the other side of the street. They're mainly on the arcade side.
Right.
So therefore, none of those buildings even come before us where we have any say in it. And like he said, now I actually think that the laundry, considering they had no rules to follow, did a pretty good job. But I think in spite of that, we should have been able to look at it. And the only way we can is if we have a historic, either overlay, historic district, or add guidelines to the other side. And I, for one, would like to see a historic district.
Yes.
To Councilman Haney's point about education, the words historic preservation are fraught with danger. They terrify people. It makes people feel like they're never going to be able to do anything, and it's going to cost a fortune. And to Councilman Blatz, I sincerely doubt that it would increase rents to have a historic district. I consider a historic district a design overlay or a parameter overlay to preserve the character of the town. Like Susan Francina has said, it really is about preserving the character of Ojai, which is preserving the value of Ojai, which is value for all of us going forward. We have had very good luck because Ron Polito, when he took over the Bank of America building and built, where Nomad and Los Caporeales and whatever it's called now, that really fits in with the town. And then Ron move down, and where the Ojai Business Center is, if you all remember that decrepit building, he did a good job. So we were extremely lucky, but we might not have those kind of developers coming forward. One of the issues that we spoke about in our last meeting is the historic code. And I found something that I consider to be an error, which I think has, I brought to your attention, a couple of the councilmen, which was the code is written for the new Ojai code to be approved. It hasn't been approved yet. Gives each parcel owner a vote about approving a historic district. And that's a loophole for developers to come in and buy a bunch of parcels, which gives them each one vote, rather than an individual having one vote. So for instance, Khaled Al-Anwar owns a number of properties downtown. Alan Haynes, they get one vote rather than one vote per property. And that prevents a developer from coming in on the sly under other names, which they do, and picking up a bunch of stuff and having a lot of votes and doing whatever they want and then leaving, which has happened here. So, you know, these historic preservation issues are about preserving value. It's not about creating hardship or creating expense, and that can be mitigated in a lot of ways, but it creates value going forward, and it tells the story of Ojai going forward, which is what preservation is about. It's about telling our story as a community and the history of the town and what the value of community really is. That's what place is. So hopefully, you know, it's a very emotional subject for people, and maybe there's a town hall meeting to be had, unless that's going to turn into a riot. But I think it could, you know, I just think there needs to be some different words, like preserve the character of Ojai is a phrase I like to use.
Well, that could be what you guys do in terms of the outreach.
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Should be what you do.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
price-wise, I mean, I've never found historic preservation to cost me, it's been a bargain for me, you know, and I can't imagine why rents would go up. It would keep somebody from putting a 3-story building downtown, you know, that's the kind of thing it does.
It happens. I mean, there's times where you know, you have damage to bring it back up to the guidelines. It's more expensive than other ways to do it. It's not an automatic thing, but I would just want to make sure that the committee, you know, in researching it, we just
Yeah.
want to make sure that's not an artificial thing we're going to create. Because I can, you know, generally historic districts increase the property values all around in the district, and that's always a positive. Purely commercial, that may benefit the landowners and maybe, you know, landlords, maybe not the tenants. But hey, if it's not going to cost any increase in rent, great. Let's just make sure we don't have a bunch of angry people or people that can't afford to, you know, continue to work on it. Because it could be the greatest historic district ever, but if 3 of the units are empty, it loses all its character completely. But I'm with you. I don't think it's a big problem, but we just want to make sure we check that box.
Yeah,
That's
but
all.
also, Councilman Blatz, those landowners come and go. So some of them are going to be unhappy, but they're not going to be here in 10 years, you know, and the downtown will be. I mean, that's what the story's about.
But I mean, if a historic district costs, you know, if it forced 2 or 3 people to have to move out of their commercial businesses, obviously that's not what we want either.
No,
But I completely agree. I think it's, in general, my default position, it's a good idea. Let's just make sure we check all the boxes, make sure it's not gonna hurt anybody, and then we get it done.
Are there vacant
Agree.
spaces downtown? I haven't seen any.
They come and go. I mean, I know there's a lot of stress in some of the land, I mean, some of
Yeah.
the commercial businesses in there for rent prices.
The
and
rent
it's-
is really, really high already, and
I mean,
that's
some are
a
up at
different,
over $3
that's a
a
whole
square foot.
different subject why that's happening. And I don't know that this designation is going to, you know, matter that much. There's other things already driving up the rent. But when it's my turn again, I have a mundane question.
Elise, comments, please?
The downtown core of Ojai, the historic district is Ojai. It's what everybody comes here for, and I feel like it needs to be protected with an overlay. And I think the reason I think this is a good time is because I believe there's going to be a general plan update fairly soon, and as was mentioned, there's the active transportation project that's in the works, and there's also been talk about design guideline updates. So this, to me, is a perfect time to put this in place while all these things are in the works. And it doesn't have to be punitive. It's our brand. It's who we are, and I just think that we can work to turn the conversation around so that it's beneficial and that it's a good thing for the town.
Yes?
No, you can go.
Okay, you
No,
two.
mine's not off.
I do think
It's-
that
yeah.
there are 2 things. There's the historic overlay and historic district. And one is more through municipal coding, and one is for preservation. And they're both important.
Oh.
So we have to be, but we have to be careful in the language and really understand the language of which one we want
Okay.
and everything. Also, there is there will be non-contributing places as well, and so,
Sure.
we're not gonna put undue stress on maybe the ones that are
And
on the
make that clear to
backside
the
of
people,
the
the
arcade, right?
difference,
And
you
it
know.
is all about
Yeah,
communication.
yeah, that's absolutely right, yeah. And this is, I think, also timely, because we need to start talking about this openly, and that's the school district.
Right.
We did landmark part of that property. But, we are, I'm not sure what the school district's plans are. We wish we had more communication with them. But they are, I think, on the verge of reviewing proposals.
I sat in the audience during so many of the historic preservation and council meetings during the whole thing with the school district. And I know that Terramino was also very heated, and I'm excited, I'm new, I want to get this going, and the commissioners are a little bit like, oh, I don't want the battles, but I think that is how you change the dialogue, and
Right.
you have community outreach, and you let people know that you're not just telling them what we're doing, but we're listening to what they want.
I'm just agreeing it's very timely.
Just an update on the Nordhoff Grammar School. The plaque is up, in case you haven't noticed it.
Great.
It's beautiful. I went to their meeting, not the last one, but the meeting before. That was postponed from a week before. And thank them for putting the plaque up and in such a obvious and impressive location. It's
And
right
thank you for
there.
working through the wording and everything with them,
I
Oh,
was
Elise.
working with Elise on that.
Thank you.
So. And yeah, we, on every step of the wording for the plaque, we did talk to Superintendent Cantwell. Yes, Elise?
Well, in terms of the agenda and what we'd like to start working on for next year, I think what we're saying is a lot of us on the HPC, we haven't voted on it yet, but it's on our agenda for this week, is that this is what a lot of us would like to focus on, is getting this going. I don't know if we've made any decisions about the Boyd Club or the library, but I don't know if we want to spend money on it for this next year. But
Well, that's something that will come up in the HPC. We set the priorities. Discussions that have taken place, just preliminarily, is the fact that it's going to take us a lot of time before we get to where we would need historic reports for downtown. So that may be a year or more.
oh,
Maybe the subsequent budget, the
oh,
2021.
I would argue, just as an individual council person, to go ahead and come up with a number and request for this coming budget year.
Okay.
Just because I consider these historic resources surveys, they're just good documentation of history. They're just good to have around, have on file. They pull together information that we don't have otherwise. And that's what I've really come to appreciate. Reading through them, whether or not we actually act on them or not, just having them done helps with our collective, memory.
Well,
And so,
I was thinking of 10,000, but I don't.
well, I would just think, I would urge you to come up with a request for us to
Yeah.
examine in the next budget cycle. That's my personal feeling.
How much would it cost
Okay.
us to resurrect David Mason and do it for free?
I know where he's
Gotta get your
buried.
crystal, get your
I was
crystal and
there.
channel,
Again, I want to give we're talking about the historic resources report. Craig emailed me a while ago and said, hey, how can I get a copy of this report? And a big shout out to Sherry Herbrook, who took all of the historic resources reports and linked those to each line in
Wonderful.
the list of historic resources report. So if you go to the list of the landmarks, you'll see a yellow highlight there. You click on that yellow highlight, it will take you directly to that historic resource report.
Just expressing my
That's
opinion,
that's great.
is I would welcome a request.
Thank you.
A budget
Personally.
request?
Huh?
A
Yes,
budget request?
from you guys, personally, that's my
Yeah.
personal feeling, one
That's
council.
what I
Okay,
feel.
well,
Mine
one
too.
councilman with a personal view, okay, I'll give you another one. I agree with what Bill has said as far as the value of them, but I think the thing the city is, since the commission is asking for guidance, preparing the request is, everybody's encouraged to prepare whatever requests for whatever
Right.
purpose they think is worthy of consideration. But when we are not paving our streets, and we're not doing the fundamentals of the city, and the economy is starting to soften, and we're in the longest expansion. We just need to all be very practical about this, that we know we have a fire situation that was going to be with us in perpetuity. We live in a dangerous area. We know we have a drought with water. We just came from closed sessions on air quality and lawsuits. So I only say that as a cautionary note, but that isn't to say don't ask, but
He's
just
asking.
recognize we're going to have to set
Have
it
to
up
make a
there and
choice.
figure out, where we are.
Yeah.
I have a question. Let's say it's not in the budget to do the entire thing. It's gonna take a couple of years of cycles to do this. Is there a way, could it be split up over maybe the?
Chunk it down,
Of course,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, do it
At
in
least we're
phases.
moving
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
budget for half of it or something like that.
So, City Manager McCleary, you commented on the Historic Resource Report for this year. Your thoughts on a historic downtown overlay or district?
You put him on that spot.
Well, I'm here to serve at the pleasure
Yeah,
of the
there you
council,
go.
so- and I'm sure they'll do whatever the Historic Preservation Commission urges them to do. I'm sure they'll urge them to do the right thing. Well, I don't think I need to, I think we've heard some very good comments tonight. I think Mayor Pro Tem Francina made a very good comment just in terms of, I think most people do think of Ojai's downtown as being a historic area, even if it's not designated necessarily as a district. I think people have that understanding, even if they're walking through here perhaps for the first time. I think they understand that they're walking into something that is a piece of history. So I would certainly encourage you all to continue to work towards that. So one thing that I did want to note, just because it had come up in the questions here, in the conversation about the school district property, the Chaparral property. So the district did put out a request for proposals for people to come forward with long-term lease considerations. Those proposals are due. The deadline to get those to the district is this Friday. Can't speak. February 15th. So this
Right.
Friday. So that is the deadline for that. So I would suspect that the district will be taking a look at those and sometime soon and making some type of decision on how they want to proceed.
We're in those same lines. We're also trying to coordinate a special session with the school board, like we did last year, and that's one of the topics.
Great, excellent. Thank you, Councilman Haney. Yes.
Okay, will you lay to rest a question everybody has, which is, can a mural be put on the side of the theater? Even if whatever the designation is there anything that would prevent that? And if it was a nice mural and we all agree.
So
Yeah.
as some of you may know, I occasionally bring David Mason with me in the form of the
Yes.
bracelet that he was wearing when he passed away. So all I'm going to say tonight, I know you're watching, is no. That's from David Mason.
So he's opposed to any mural on
he
the
was.
side of the
Post
theater?
Yeah, he was.
And
Otherwise, I don't know the answer to that.
okay,
I
but
think it has
what's the real answer?
It's not historic.
I think you're talking about
That's
tiles.
the question. That's the question I have.
You're not talking about a painted mural. I believe it's a tile
Well, I don't
mural.
know yet what I'm talking about. I know that over the years, there's been a lot of talk about that Ojai needs at least a mural somewhere. We don't have, do we have
Oh, no.
Myers Oaks? But a mural that is a
I see
beautiful
a
mural.
joint art commission historic preservation.
Yeah,
Commission
yeah.
in the
Yeah,
future.
but okay, but
I'll
I
get
guess, but the
popcorn and
simple
watch.
question is there a legal reason, that building is prohibited from having a mural?
just-
Mayor
That's
Pro
my
Tem
cue.
standing
You have
right
to look
behind
at the
you is
code.
Matt
Mayor Pro Tem, I
Summers.
realize you can't see me behind you. That's my cue, though. Is there a legal question? So the answer is that nothing in the city's municipal code, including the recently rewritten signed ordinance, affirmatively blocks murals. Whether it would be appropriate given the character of that building is a question perhaps for the HPC, perhaps for community development, and certainly for the property owner, the owner of the building. But there's nothing that categorically blocks murals as a thing in the sign code. I know there was rumors at some point that was the case. That is not the
Yeah.
case. So that's the legal answer. The other answers is more of a question of appropriateness.
Yes,
Susan,
thank you very much.
I'll
That
say
makes
too,
sense.
when I was special counsel for the city working against Golden State, the side of that building was covered in Tyvek plastic and it had big blue letters on it. We did informally discuss the idea of what we would be able to paint over that, or if there'd be a mural or something. And it was said that if we could figure it out, we would be allowed to do it, but it was a long way from actually come to fruition.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Vega.
If I can add just two quick comments about that as well. The Arts Commission is actually currently discussing proposing a mural ordinance to the City Council that would clarify some of these things. And also, just so everybody is aware, the commission had actually approached the Playhouse owner about putting a mural on the building, and after discussing it with him, it was very early stages, he requested that they not do so at the moment, so that has been put on hold.
Because it's for sale.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense, that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. yeah.
Like I said, you guys have a joint meeting.
Um,
You couldn't even put stucco on it.
So,
I mean, oh, anyway. I hope, I'm sorry.
no, you're
I
fine.
hope everyone knows I'm talking about a very tasteful, beautiful
Oh, wait,
mural.
now, don't take a position. Don't take a position.
Mural.
Well, I mean, it would go through a lot of vetting, you know, we're not talking
Something with
about,
Velcro. so
we're
we
not
can
talking
see.
about
Well, if
graffiti.
Sousa paints it, it would be perfect.
No, we already have somebody else in mind.
Okay,
But-
guys.
Okay, let me get back to,
Focus here.
again, to what our item one was, discuss council priorities, and I do appreciate everybody's comments on the historic downtown district or overlay. One item that is a priority and has involved both of us is, I'm told, by Mr. Vega, I believe, that the HPC terms will come before the city council in 2 weeks. Is that correct, Mr. Vega?
Yes.
So I just wanted to alert the commission members that that's what's taking place. For information on everybody else, the updated terms did come before as a courtesy copy before the Historic Preservation Commission. We discussed it, or we reviewed it at the last meeting, and if there were concerns about it, the commissioners were invited to come and attend that city council meeting and share any thoughts they might have.
And I certainly noted, like Commissioner Comrie had a comment, I certainly noted that and looking at making some tweaks to the language.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I will take mea culpa. I was the one who changed the wording because I felt it was fair doing one property, one vote. Commissioner
there was
Convery
another
explained
comment
to me that she was the real purpose behind that. The California, not the Secretary of the Interior, but the woman that we sent the initial terms to said, yeah, no, that change isn't in keeping with the standards, so.
Well, we'll look at that when it comes to.
Yeah, so that will come up.
I thought, wasn't that
Next week.
clarified in the Terramina?
In the term,
districting? You know,
actually,
because that was one of the sticking points, was who had the right to vote, the renter or the owner.
actually, it came up in the Terramina discussion, and I spent, since I'd been working with them closely, I spent time in the HPC meeting explaining to the 40 or 50 people that were out there exactly how the voting took place. And the voting was one vote per owner. So if the owner owned 5 properties, they got 1 vote. However, if a couple had joint tenancy on the home, they got 2 votes for their one piece of property. And so we went through and explained that in detail to
That's the
the
state
40 or
guideline?
50 people. Yeah,
That's just
it is.
interesting, huh?
So I tried to be fair and I got unfair. So that was me, sorry.
So now it's changed in the proposed ordinance, but you're hoping it'll get changed
No, I didn't,
back,
I'm
or-
not saying anything, I was really taking another comment. that
So,
Commissioner
so,
Convery
yeah,
made.
so that will come back before the city council and we'll let them
It'll be back
discuss that.
before us to discuss.
There's a number of people here who are waiting in the lobby. They're allowed to come in, correct? Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can come in. We haven't started city council yet. We're having a special meeting.
So anyway, I just want to let everybody know that that's scheduled for the next council meeting on the 26th. Other priority items from council members?
I would certainly entertain, the last item in our packet today is a essay by, I'll call it an essay by our Community Development Director on adaptive reuse guidelines. I would urge all the commissioners to look at that, and I certainly think we should be getting input from the commission on anything like that. So,
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that, especially since it says adaptive reuse for historic
well,
buildings.
and it mentions that,
In
and
the
I
I-
personally am going to be prone during council time to suggest that it be referred to planning commission for review. That's, I mean, not planning commission, historic preservation
Yeah.
commission.
How did that happen to come on the agenda?
I think the community development director put it on there.
No, it was requested by 2 members of council.
Well, that was a while back.
That's why it's on the agenda. It was requested by 2 members of
Adaptive
council.
reuse guidelines, that was months and months ago, we brought that up.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, so, but I think it's appropriate this commission look at that report when we get your feedback. Just wanted to let you know that's how I feel.
It is 29 pages, and it is the last agenda tonight.
49?
29, 29.
Oh.
We may not get to it.
It's what I'll be looking at in between items that.
Please start, I know you'll read it, so, you know, you'll read every word.
Is there anything else? Is there anything else that we should bring up before we close the
Well,
meeting?
Do they have any of,
We did in part, because that was a priority. So we will talk in the HPC, and we will come up with what the priorities are and the submittals that are going to go to the city council. That's part of one of our budget items, or one of our line items in our HPC meeting. Thank you, though, for asking. Anything else? Oh, cool.
All right.
Okay.